Alderwoman Martin,
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Bosley, Alderwoman Middlebrook, Chairman Boyd,
Present.
3 present.
Okay, in absence of a quorum, what we're going to do today is we're going to just move to a presentation by the street department. And so we're going to have Mr. Kent Flake come up and start us off. And the purpose of this hearing and presentation from the street department today is to give us an update of where the city is as it relates to speed humps, alley and street pavings, trash services, as well as the process to go through alley and street vacations.
That is correct. Thank you, members of the board. I'm Ken Flake, Commissioner of Streets, if you don't know who I am. I brought Randy with Refuse and Zach Fortune with the Street Director's Office with me today. Randy's going to start off talking trash.
All right. We like talking trash.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Just want to give you a quick update of where we've been and where we are now. So I want to just start off, everybody remembers the summer of 2018, what a terrible situation we were in. At that point, we had approximately 93 trucks in our fleet. On an average daily basis, we had 47 trucks up. Our daily routes are 55, so you can see why we struggled so much. Our average age of our trucks in summer of 2018 was about 11 and a half, 12 years old. Our CSBs for refuse not collected that summer averaged about 60 a week. Since then, we put a 10-year replacement plan in place where we're going to be allocating $1.8 million per year for refuse vehicles. They cost approximately $250,000 a piece. Since we started that program a few years ago, we've purchased 25 new side load refuse vehicles, 4 new cart vehicles, 2 rear load vehicles, and 1 flatbed truck. That brought the average age of the fleet to around 9.5 years old. And it also helped us bring our average CSBs for refuse not collected down from approximately 60 per week to around 34 per week. Our latest October readings, we were all the way down to 20 complaints per week, so we're slowly but surely getting better. Since 2018 with 93 trucks, the amount that have been surplused gave us an average. Now we got 84 trucks in our fleet, and we're able to have about 60 plus running every day. Pretty much our biggest issue now is our driver situation. We have the vehicles, but we do not have the drivers. Our TO has 73 driver positions, and currently we have 62 filled, so we're 11 short. Gives us about an average of 52 drivers a day for 55 routes. So we're still, constantly behind the 8 ball. We pretty much have to work every Wednesday to make up, what we can't do on our normal work days, and then occasionally we have to work Saturdays too. And we do have a plan in place for fiscal year 20 as far as vehicles. We're going to get 5 more cart side load vehicles, 2 alley side loaders, and we're going to get a new cabin chassis to mount on one of our trucks that was in an accident this past summer. So pretty much our biggest challenge right now is not having the manpower to do our job.
Randy, do you actually have a report with the information that you just presented, something in writing that we can look at?
I got a bunch of scratchy notes, but I can prepare a report.
Would you? And just send us the summary of what you just kind of shared with us.
Absolutely, sure.
unless you're taking copious notes, it was kind of hard to keep up with some of that stuff.
Okay.
But I remember in my head, majority of what you said. So I'm going to, you finished?
Yep, that's
Okay.
pretty much
I'm
mine.
going to go ahead and ask the committee people that have questions. Alderwoman Murphy?
Yeah, I guess just one, do we have a reason why we can't fill the positions? Do we think it's the city residency? Do we think it's pay?
I think it has a lot to do with the city residency. I mean, most of our people we get now are, bus drivers, and, they got their CDLs, but a lot of them fail their work and test period because driving a bus is a lot different than driving a trash truck in an alley.
And we train them
We
if
train
they
them.
qualify
Oh, yeah,
with the other.
we train them.
We train them.
Yes, we put them through about a 4-week training period at least.
Okay.
But yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
our biggest challenge, is
Big
we
thing.
just can't get any qualified drivers.
Oh, I'll be darned. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderwoman Martin?
Alderwoman Murphy pretty much asked my question. Besides that, do you think an increase in pay would make a difference?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
think we're still below the national average in what our HEO2s make compared to other drivers around the country.
Do you have a,
I'm sorry.
oh no, do you have just to put in that memo that Alderman Boyd requested, do you have a chart or pay comparison?
I did not bring that with me, but yeah, we did do a pay comparison. I can include that in my report.
Okay,
for you.
sorry if you've already given that to us before. I'm sure you have, but I'd like to see it again.
Okay,
All right,
sure.
thank you.
That's not a problem.
Okay. Randy, is there a strategy with personnel to kind of help us get more drivers? Are they doing any special advertisement or anything like that you're aware of?
I mean, we advertise on our trash trucks. We've communicated with them. We've written, letters to them, requesting, just a little bump just to get us, close to the national average.
Are you aware if they are networking with some of the truck driving schools? I don't know how much experience you have to get to drive a trash truck, but,
I mean, we just pretty much require CDL,
okay.
and then, like I say, we have a training program in place where we'll send our veterans out, give them good training. From there.
Are there any seasonal drivers that work for the street department? It may be more of a Kent question, but I'm just wondering if they're seasonal and they're off-season, can they become trash drivers? Kent, you want to speak to that a little bit? But don't go anywhere.
We had seasonal drivers probably up to 2008. Once the economy went kind of in the toilet, that was one of the first things that got cut. We've had mixed issues with the seasonal drivers or temporary drivers. On the street division side, I can't speak for the refuse side. I don't know that they've ever had seasonal. But when you get seasonal guys, they tend to tear up as much as they actually help. So your damage claims go through the roof. It's certainly
Microphone, Kent.
Microphone.
It's certainly something that should be probably considered in the future, just simply because that kind of gets you around the residency rule and opens your pool up a little more.
Okay. Hopefully that's something we could really think about, because I'm guessing there's a lot of overtime, Randy, would that be correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And that may bring about driver fatigue.
That is correct.
Which-
I mean, I'm surprised our drivers survived the summer of 2018. I mean, they did an outstanding job working with us. I mean, when you have to have mandatory OT, that's, never a good thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we got some good drivers for sure. Just
Check
need
may
some
be
more of them.
nice, but your mental health wears down.
Oh, yeah. I mean, forcing people to work on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yeah. Let's see. I have a question about private streets. So we pick up trash on private streets, correct?
Correct.
And since we're all paying for trash service, do the residents still have to provide their own trash bin?
Correct. I think there's only a few private alleys that we service. I don't think there's very many.
If they're paying for trash service, why would they have to buy their trash bin?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. No, they don't have to buy their trash bin, that's provided by us.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, so can you look into Oak Court for me? Because I'm told the people on Oak Court have to provide their own bins, even though we pick their trash
Yeah,
up.
I don't know any streets or
That's the
alleys.
1200 block of Oak Court, right off of Page. So if you would look into that for me, I meant to ask you about that some time ago when it came to my attention, but,
I'll do that.
see, overtime, how about exceptions, who pays for, okay. All right, Alderwoman Boyd, any questions?
Yes.
Okay, you want to bring the microphone to you, please?
Okay, thank you. Brandy, I never know, I always have to keep calling and asking, and I forget who my driver is that does my refuge on 5600 block of Pamplin. But thank him for me personally, because he does a superb job in our alley. I could put that out there.
Good deal, I will let him know.
Yeah, as people argue and say that they don't get out and pick up trash he does. And so he even works with the residents when we have issues, and he'll come back and help them clean it up. So thank him for me, please.
I will, that's great. That's the second alder person that's told me that this week, so
Yeah,
it's good to hear.
and I love them for it, so they're doing good. And I do see more trucks, but I guess my concern is you say you still have openings in the refuge department?
We're, as far as our HEO2s, we're 11 short on our TO right now.
Okay, and so what do you think is the holdup for you getting employees?
Honestly, I think it's the residency rule.
Okay, so you think it's the residency rule. Okay, and the reason why I ask, because it is people that I know that work for the city that has tried to transfer. They're already working and trying to transfer to refuge, but they're not getting any lead or anything. And so that's what I was trying to find out.
Yeah,
What
I
do
mean,
you
as
think
long
was
as,
the holdup?
as long as they have a CDL, you know.
Now, if
don't-
and I guess that person does, but I'm just thinking, if a person doesn't, I know once upon a time you had said you all were willing to train them for that, to get a CDL. So that wouldn't hold them up if they were willing to go through the training.
Yeah, we still give them, we still give them, if they don't have their CDA, we still give them a chance to get it during their work and test period.
Okay, and that was kind of my concern, because my concern also is I keep hearing in these departments the overtime piece. And so I think as a city, we need to start looking at how to be more creative in regards to that, because that impacts, as Alderman Boyd said, that impacts the person as a whole, and then it takes away from their family. And so they're not able to enjoy their life because they're steadily working the overtime.
I agree.
So I'm just trying to figure out a way how maybe we can help you all to kind of reduce that and get staff in there to help you on where you need to be. So that's why I was asking
I
that
understand.
question.
Okay.
And then again, thank you, because you're real responsive to me, and you always try to help me. It's just this whole dumping situation, it's just pulling my
know.
hair out. I don't know about yours.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean,
Right.
our
'cause
ball
it's-
crews basically have to go through the alley 2 times every month.
Right.
As soon as we go through there, we'll go back and it'll be, loaded again, so.
Right,
it's-
and,
that's a whole nother.
The task force has gotten on me several times, because I'm at a point now, I literally follow people when they're dumping and take pictures, and I approach them and let them know this is not okay with us. And so they kind of got on me. But I think the frustration, especially with the debris team that we have, like you said, Zach and them will send somebody over there, clean the area up, and they'll come back in less than 24 hours. It's like they never touched it. And so that's frustrating for me as an elected official, because I know what they're doing, but it just seems like their work is in vain. And so let them know we appreciate what they're trying to do. It's just that we just got to get a hold on this dumping thing. That's
I
all.
totally agree, 100%. That's our biggest battle is,
That dumping.
part of having alley containers and alleys, It's
And I
part of-
think a frustration with a lot of residents is when they're dumping next to the dumpster. Zach and I went to a site and we lifted the dumpster's lids, they were empty. And all the trash was outside the dumpster. And I think that's the frustration, because they don't even have enough decency to put it in the dumpster.
Right.
So, again, thank you all very much. If there's anything I can do in regards to helping get staff and push the process to get you out some assistance, to get relief on your staff, let me know.
I appreciate that, Alderman.
Thank you.
Randy, one more question as far as who pays for trash containers. I know for years the aldermen out of their capital budget were 100% paying for trash containers, although some wards that didn't pay still got trash service. And then when we passed the increase, we were supposed to be relieved of having to add to that. So are we paying for trash containers, or are we not paying for trash containers?
Well, like you get $900,000 a year, and I pretty much divide that up 28 ways.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do surveys of the ward, I pretty much only ask the alderpersons that are above that $34,000 in replacement costs.
So we're still paying for it, basically.
Yes, yes. I mean, a lot of the wards are in decent shape, but there's also quite a few that are not in decent shape.
But it was my understanding that we will stop paying for trash service. I'm gonna ask Todd about that, because Todd testified at the hearing that that was the direction that we were going, and it's not fair.
Stop paying for trash service?
I'm not trash service, trash containers, thank you. We shouldn't be adding to that from our capital.
Yes, like I say, I got $900,000 to play with, but, you know, there is some
But
more.
maybe somebody need to increase that 900,000 to 1.8 million, you know, because I'm just thinking that that's just not fair.
I mean, we need about 1.4 million a year to keep up with our bad cans. That's what it averages about.
That was the commitment that I got to support a increase in the trash service, that extra $3. It was cameras. Also, we were not going to contribute any more to trash containers. So Todd is standing behind you, so it means he wants to come and address that, which I certainly appreciate. So he has your back, literally.
Thanks,
Todd Walterman, come tell everybody who you are, what you do for the city.
Thank
and
you,
clear
Chairman.
this-
Todd Walterman,
clear up this
Operations
potential
Director for the Mayor.
misunderstanding. Okay.
I just, I heard the conversation about the dumpsters and about the promises and when the rate increase came in, and you're correct. When it originally came to that committee, the goal was to pick up the cost for the cans. But if I can bring back to memory of what happened during that committee meeting, was there was concerns about the trash task force not being funded completely. And some of those funds that were earmarked for cans went to the trash task force. You made a very strong push that you wanted this task force funded. So in there, we're funding the police officers overtime to go do this. There's money in there to replenish the cameras and increase cameras. This year, we went from about 110 cameras to 200 cameras in there. Those were all the items where you and the committee moved the money around to put it toward that trash task force. And I think that was a win. I think everybody here agrees that that trash task force is kicking butt and taking names. But that was some of the sacrifice that happened. We had to pull out $300,000 or $400,000 off of the can purchase to move it over there to make that a strong operation. Okay, but we originally went in with the idea that the aldermen wouldn't have to pay for that anymore. But we were getting our butts kicked by dumping back then, and we had to make those decisions as a group.
Can we revisit that and look at how we can get 1.4 million into refuse without having to take from more capital? It seems like the city is doing a really good job managing our money these days. We had a $25 million surplus, I heard, so I could just imagine how we could have saved some of that war capital toward additional projects. And I know we won't get it every year. We won't get that every year.
When we raised the refuse rate, okay, it was very important that that went back into the refuse department. And that went into this 10-year equipment replacement program, which appears to be working. That's why you heard Randy say his equipment's starting to work again. 7 new trucks coming in this year. 1 year will be 9, but it's all graphed out to try to keep this equipment down to its working life, so we're not driving 20-year-old equipment. That needs all the funds it has. The big portion of the other funds went to the trash task force.
Right.
So there's only so much
Right,
that we
but-
got, whatever, I don't remember the number, but it's committed.
Right,
So you gotta rob Peter to pay Paul if you're gonna put more in there to get rid of the can case. Now, the
You
only
know
other
who does
place
it?
there might be money is in your citywide capital fund. So when you speak to a surplus,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and then half of that goes into the citywide capital and half goes into the reserves. You know, and this year that was $11.5 million went in there, and you guys just supported a bill that helped us put more cameras out there, cut the trees down that we fell behind on, and put something into our finance system funding, and I don't remember all the details, but you guys funded about $7 million worth of that, and then the rest went to the Cure Violence. You pulled another $3.5 million of that and put it toward Cure Violence. So right now, there's $1.5 million sitting there that wasn't expended, and that was kind of set aside if we're going to do body cameras. We thought we could buy the body camera equipment with that if that's what the decisions are. But that's the end of the surplus money. That's all the money.
Right.
I know we got way off on tangent here, and I appreciate you listening to me, but
But what I'm asking, Todd, is that you can find $500,000 to add to refuge so that we don't have to come out of our ward capital, because $30,000 is about 4 streets to be paved, Kent, is that about right? You know, and so we could be doing other service in our ward with that ward capital money while the administration support us by finding another $500,000 toward refuge budget.
we can definitely put that on the list.
Okay, I think I'll get on Ways and Means next year and help you.
That'd be great. We could use some good, smart people to help us out.
Really?
Uh-oh.
Really?
That's, well, what did you mean by that? Because you don't want to
Assist
offend any
Alderwoman
alderman.
Boyd.
There is never enough help at budget time.
There you go, that sounds
Better
good.
clean that one up, right,
I
right.
misspoke.
Right, there you
My
go.
apologies
We're going to send you to some workshops. Okay.
for listening.
Alderman Gunther is not on the committee, but Alderman Gunther, if you'd like to ask any questions, feel free.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my only question is because they just mentioned that we went from 100 cameras to 200 cameras. Do we have a breakout of how many cameras per ward?
There is a
any-
breakout.
Is there any way you can email that to us? Because I haven't recently seen, since we've had the new allocation of cameras, I've heard that we were getting more cameras in our wards, but I'm not sure that we have, so.
Yeah,
is
we
there-
got it broken down by ward. I can send that to you.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Alley cameras.
Yeah, the alley cameras. Yeah, and then I'll just say that I haven't emailed you much lately because the streets and alleys look good, so thank you.
That's good to hear. Thanks, Alderman.
Thanks.
Alderman Gunther, I think it's timely that maybe we'll have the trash task force commander come in and give us another update. He typically comes in every 3 or 4 months, so stay tuned for that.
Thank you.
Okay, Randy, thank you.
Thank you.
Trying to find you $500,000, Randy.
I'm sorry?
I'm trying to find you $500,000.
Uh-oh.
Kent's going to talk to us about streets and alleys.
Okay.
Not yet. I got a couple
Why we
notes
didn't-
on what we talked about here at Refuge. Just so you know, if you go back to 2018, our truck situation, you know, we ran on average 45% trucks down in summer 2018.
How many?
45% of them were down. And I do have a note list that I will provide you after this meeting,
Okay.
as you requested. Currently in 2019, we're running about 25% of what we have running is down. So that is very substantial difference right there. Once again, these are just numbers. In 2018, we had almost 1,900 CSBs for solid waste collection only. This year to date, we're a little under 1,200. So this money going towards these trucks is making a huge difference. As Randy mentioned, employees. Currently, just in route collection drivers, we're almost 20% down. And a couple other notes, you mentioned we had 62 drivers and we had 52 drivers out on a normal day. Just for some clarification on that, you got guys on vacation, sick leave, workers' comp. That's where those 10 people are different at. And another thing that streets, refuse, I think all the street department in general has started doing, which we never did in the past, is we'll bring guys in with a CDL permit only. I think anybody in this room could actually go down to the DMV and get a CDL permit. Once you have that,
Not me.
you probably could. It's pretty easy. It's a written test, so there's not much to it. And we're bringing those guys in automatically. We're training them. Hopefully, once we get them trained, they pass their work and test period, and hopefully they stay. The problem with that is the hopefully they stay part. Because it all comes down to money. Especially once they get that CDL, they see Joe Blow Trucking up the road, and they're hiring $15, $18, $20 an hour. I'm not sure what we're paying in HEO2, but I think it's around $14.50, $15, somewhere in there. And Alderman Pam Boyd, as far as there's a citywide transfer policy. Most employees are not aware of it as far as somebody wanting to transfer over. Most people don't really understand that. So their best bet is to talk to hopefully a higher level supervisor that can explain that to them. Because if it's the same grade, so it's an HEO2 over somewhere to an HEO2 with refuse, it's easy.
But if they're in another department?
Even if they're in another department, if they're the same grade, it's easy.
Okay.
If it's a promotion, it goes through the normal hiring process where you got to get put an app in and then get hired for a promotion.
Okay.
But if it's simply going from a G11, I think a pay grade 11 to a pay grade 11 at refuse, that can be done in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
It requires the employee to send a letter or write a letter to their appointing authority. That appointing authority will either sign off on it or not. If they sign off on it, then that letter goes to the appointing authority of where they want to be hired from. And then usually within a week or two, that can go through.
Okay.
And to talk about debris just a little bit because it came up, year to date this year, we picked up 25,000 tons of debris that went to the landfill. I don't even know how to quantify 25,000 tons of debris. At a neighborhood meeting Saturday, the whole time I'm trying to how do I quantify 25,000 tons? Because I deal in tons all the time, but I can't quantify 25,000 tons of debris. It's like 300,000 couches.
Yeah, and mattresses.
And mattresses, et cetera. And that program's really came a long way in the last year. Our typical response time to a CSP for illegal dumping is less than 2 weeks. And some of you know we practically live in your ward. I mean, we're in 27, 22, almost daily. And just wanted to highlight those, and I think I covered everything else. So Zach is going to come talk to us about speed humps and tell us everything we wanted to know about speed humps.
Paving. Who's going to talk about paving?
I'm going to talk about paving.
Okay, but you want to do speed humps. But I do want to say, mention about the debris pickup. I think you guys did an incredible job blending streets with refuse and having street do all the debris pickup. I think that's working a lot better than the previous system. So I just want to commend you guys for thinking outside the box on that, because I think we're a little more efficient with that system.
I certainly appreciate that, and what we found is a lot of it's just communication, especially between the bulk guys and the guys with front loaders. A lot of stuff, the bulk guys can pick up a toilet. It's pretty easy. Don't need to send a big loader for that. And their communication has been priceless throughout this whole thing and has made this run pretty smooth.
So I want to thank you for that.
Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
Morning, Aldermen. Good morning, Alderwomen. My name is Zach Fortune, Street Department Liaison. I am here on behalf of Deanna Vanker, Traffic Commissioner, just to give you guys a heads up on our speed hump process and where we're at today. If you guys look at the packet in front of you, speed hump update. At the stapled part of that, if you go to page 5, you'll see a flow chart there of just a quick how the process works. I'll run through that real quick, and then we'll get into some numbers. So number one, request for a traffic calming. Number two, Alderman and Street Department meet to discuss issue. Everybody on the same page? Everybody?
Yes, thank you.
Number three, Street Department coordination with BPS. BPS then will use the on-call traffic engineer consultant to perform an evaluation. Number five, BPS, Alderman and Street Department meet to discuss results, traffic engineering evaluation. Number six, design traffic calming measure through BPS. Number seven, construction of traffic calming measure. And then the post-construction activities is just public education and enforcement of the traffic calming measures. So to get into some numbers for these speed humps, we started this process back in 2016. As of yesterday, we've had 336 requests. Out of those 336, we have installed 135 speed humps throughout the city. At the back end, you guys have a spreadsheet that shows per ward what requests came in, what was approved, what was denied, and what is installed per ward. So currently, Traffic Department has sent all of the evaluations to Board of Public Service. We no longer do those in-house due to staffing issues. So on the list right now, I believe there's 147 locations that BPS are holding on to right now for a speed study evaluation. As of yesterday, they were still in the process of bidding those locations out for the speed study to take place. I believe that'll be taken care of within the next week. They're going to use 3 consultants and divide those 147 between those 3 consultants and start the process.
Excuse me, Zach.
Yes, sir.
I'm following you, some of your numbers on the spreadsheet, but do you have a document that we can follow you with what you're talking about?
Oh, this is just my overview sheet, so it's just something that's just clarifying what you're looking at.
Okay. So go back to how many is out for the consultant to study? Where's that data?
There's 147 locations that are out for location right now, and I don't believe you have.
It's on the bottom of that page.
I don't see that.
Okay, on your front page, speed hump update,
Yeah.
Oh, the front page.
yes,
Right
there's
here.
currently 131 requests on this page, but I got some other numbers here that state it's about 147.
Okay, gotcha.
Right here?
Okay.
Yeah, it just keeps going. It's right here.
Yeah, you also on your
Okay. I see
current
it.
Got it?
spreadsheet, those last 3 columns there
I'm with you now.
are your main data.
Because that's for 2019.
Okay.
Yep, so you guys have any questions for me regarding this?
I do.
Okay.
But I'm going to yield to my committee members in order. Alderwoman Murphy.
Zach, thank you. When a speed study is done, I know we don't know exactly when it's going to happen or whatever, are we notified that it was a positive or a negative?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, because that's what I don't recall. Perhaps I did get an email, but I don't recall, because I never know when the study's going to take place. So then people keep asking me what happened, and I don't know. So, so we are emailed that it was a positive result or a negative, which quite a few of mine were. But I thought I had to inquire about that.
Yes, ma'am, and unfortunately, since the traffic division quit doing the speed studies,
Okay.
we've accumulated 147 of them over the past year, and they're just now going out for bid.
They're going out
So
for
that's just unfortunately, it's a timely process.
Okay.
But hopefully, we're going to get on track. And
Okay.
once the results come in, myself or the traffic commissioner will meet with you in person or a phone call.
And tell us that it was a negative, no speed hump
Absolutely,
is
and
required.
then follow up with an
Okay.
email for documentation.
And then my understanding is that if the speed study dictates no speed hump is required, or recommended, there is no way that we can get them for the constituents, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Martin.
Thank you. I know this is not necessarily in your purview, but one thing that frustrates me is I think there's an overarching point of view that we sort of miss in the city. I saw Steve Conway, I don't know if he's still in here, but it's also a lack of enforcement, and it's frustrating because we have to spend more capital or city money on speed humps or, I like this, this process, but some of it is picking and choosing which streets and which residents get them and who doesn't. And it's probably my number one complaint. And then I was up in North City a couple weekends ago, and people were just as bad on North Broadway, running red lights, and same thing in my ward. And that's what's so frustrating to me, and I just want to put that out there on record, that I feel like if we had more traffic enforcement, then we would not see the type of speeding and running of the red lights and stop signs that we see. So, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, I agree.
Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
And I kind of ditto what Alderwoman Morton is saying, because it's trying to get the residents to understand we can't put speed bumps on every street. And so they were like, but we put, in perfect example, they put speed bumps on a street in my ward, it never stopped them. It never stopped the speeding. And so we have school buses over there, and so I have asked continuously for the police during those times to have someone there. They're not there. And so now we're at risk, like we had the incident on Goodfellow, of a child being hit because they're not enforcing this. So I guess my question is, have we, and I always try to think out of the box, have we come up with something else that we could do? Because now I have a street that was blocked. The residents don't want it blocked, but they don't want the speeding. And everybody was like, well, the speed bumps, but all the time, that's not the answer. So is there something else we could do to look at to slow the traffic down?
We're always interested in looking at new and exciting traffic calming measures, but at this point, this is what we have in place. And again, it's an enforcement issue.
Right.
When you don't have the enforcement, people run wild.
And I do know that Todd on one street has suggested to put the Shamo pots in the middle of the street. He said maybe that would slow them down, because we're just trying to figure some way. And I mean, now I'm even putting them in the alleys, because people flying through the alleys. So I'm just like, it's got to be another logical way that we could address this. So
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just open if you all have anything else we could do.
To talk about your alleys, if you guys ever want speed bumps, not speed humps in your alleys, that's a $200 fix. There's nothing no study needs to take place. You give me a call, transfer funds, and we'll get that installed for you in any alley.
Yeah, you were real responsive. It was 2 alleys we had. You were real responsive to it. I'm not taking anything away, but I just think we are speed humping ourselves into bankruptcy. That's
Yes,
how
ma'am.
I look at it, because everybody thinks that's gonna fix their street, and it's not.
Yes, ma'am. I believe Todd might have something to say.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, please, Todd.
I normally don't do all this interruption, but in the absence of our street director and our traffic commissioner, they're actually working on an RFP to consider red light cameras and speed cameras. It's on the street. I believe it went on the street last week. They did an RFI probably 4 months ago. They didn't get much data back. It's an exploratory RFP because of state legislation. They've got some very tough rules now to make this work. So it's a balance between state law and technology and expense and cost and manpower on whether or not this system will work. Because we now, under state law, we have to identify the driver. We got to recognize their face. And an officer has to prove that it's them in the car, and then they'll wind up getting points on their license. So we're doing everything. When Zach say we're doing everything, they didn't know about this because their bosses are working on it, and trying to get it out there. We don't know if it'll be fruitful on that. It's not a big money grab. It's going to take a lot of technology to make something like this work. And so we think there's about a half a dozen vendors out there that may bid on this thing. Bids are probably doing about 4 weeks. So I just wanted to pass that on. You seem very frustrated. I don't let you know we're all frustrated. We can't hire enough cops. We can't do all this. So we're trying to provide every tool we can.
Okay.
if there's any
Gosh,
questions.
since you stepped into this, I have a curious question. So the state law is kind of tricky on being able to have the speed cameras, and you have to identify people, faces. But did you know that when you get a parking ticket, they don't identify your face of the driver, and we still have to pay the parking ticket? It just kind of make you go,
I hear your pain.
Can we
That-
protest our parking
That,
tickets?
that office does not fall underneath the direction of the mayor. Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize that I can't handle that one.
Okay. All right. Speaking of traffic calming, well, I'm going to have Scott Ogilvy come up at some point, but I have two questions I'm going to ask you. Hopefully you can answer these.
Okay.
Do we know the timeline it takes from a request for a speed hump to the engineering study to installation?
I do not have that exact number.
Okay.
As soon as we get this consultant on board, I believe it'll be a speedier process. But I'm thinking just the evaluation itself, once you put that request in and we have somebody on call, it shouldn't take more than a couple weeks.
Because the frustrating I get from people, it's been months. Typically, it's 3 months on average, but it's gotten longer than 3 months now. And so my constituents are frustrated because they've asked for it back in the summertime, and here the winter is coming up. I mean, some requests have been since June. So just from the data that, you know, Deanna already have, I know she's punted this to BPS, but somebody has to track this. So is it still being tracked in her office even though BPS is involved?
Yes, she still oversees the process.
Okay, so can she
Start to
get us
finish.
that data from the request date, this little timeline from the request date to sending it to BPS, to sending the information to the alderman, to having it installed?
Absolutely, I'll get that information for you. And
That's one. The other one is, how much typically does a speed hump cost?
don't quote me on this, but they range from 4,000 to 6,000.
From 4 to 6. And when the alderman requests these speed humps, are we paying for the consultant services as well?
Yes,
We are.
yes,
And before the consultant, the traffic division was doing them themselves, correct?
that's correct.
And we weren't paying for it.
That's correct.
Okay, so.
And that's
this
due
is
to
new
a
news
staffing
to the
issue.
alderman, or do the aldermen all know that the cost of the speed humps have increased because of the consultants?
That is all in the traffic calming policy that is in front of you that states what you guys are responsible to pay for and why the traffic commission or the traffic division no longer does this.
So how new is this? Is the update, I should say, because it was always my understanding that the street department would just do it.
Right, I'm not sure what the update date is on this.
Okay. Alderman Boyd?
Mr. Chair, I don't know what happened previous to me being here, but when I did it, I got a breakdown from Deanna, the cost for everything, because when residents request it, I give it back to them and say, this is what's coming out of our budget, so they're knowledgeable and knowing what it'll cost.
So with the consultants, were you paying
That
for
was in there,
consultants?
yeah.
Okay, all right.
I paid for the thing and let them know that this is, because their impression was, and I think a lot of other people, is that we didn't pay for it, that the city just does it. I'm like, no, this is what it cost, and this is what's coming out of my budget. So my residents knew that.
Yes, ma'am. And once the consultants are on board, Deanna will be able to give you a breakdown of what those costs are.
Right.
So the consultants are not on board yet.
They're still bidding right now.
So previously, everything's been done by the city. But moving forward, it's going to be done by consultants. So we're in a holding pattern until the.
That's correct.
Okay.
As of yesterday, they were still currently doing the bid process.
Okay. Alderwoman Murphy?
Yeah, one more question, Zach. So every speed study request would eventually be studied,
Yes.
right? Okay, regardless of what anybody says. If I request a speed study on this 100 block, it would be done eventually.
As long as you're going to fund it, yes.
But yeah, well, yeah, that, no, that goes without saying, yes. And as far as the time, I think it depends. I said I had one that was like 2 years from the meeting, from the initial meeting with BPS and everybody, with the, you know, the school people and the church people that requested, this is the Leona one. Now, it also involved a median too, which was a little different, but, and then the cost also, they told me, depends on the width of the street. Leona was very wide, so it cost more.
Yes, absolutely.
Alderman Gunther, you have any questions?
I'm okay on this one. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Martin.
Thank you. This just seems to me, I know Alderman Narayan is talking about introducing some legislation, but a citywide assessment, I feel like just, we handle this and this is our own fault. It's such an archaic way of ward by ward. And I don't understand why we don't take a citywide approach. None of us are civil engineers sitting up here that I know of. And it just, I find it ridiculous that we handle it ward by ward and don't assess it on a citywide level to see where the true problem spots are. Because I know everyone thinks that they're speeding in their street, but some really are experiencing worse speeding. Some business communities have to deal with it. I know South Broadway, a bar owner down there has had his car hit, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. And I really would love to see a push from all departments and the mayor's office and here at the board for a true citywide assessment, even if that means some of us get less than others. Thanks.
I hate speed humps.
Me too.
Personally, I think they're intrusive. They remind me of bars on the windows. I think they devalue our city because when you drive through a neighborhood and you're doing the hump, it's like, man, it must be a speeding problem over it. It must be people out of control. I mean, it's just a perception. It's not a reflection of you now, Zach. It's just a perception of what it does to our community. And I agree, it's very archaic. I think enforcement would be a lot better. I unfortunately have a speed hump near my house. I was in a re-election campaign, and it kind of got past me. Otherwise, I would have not supported that. And now the prostitutes use that as a positioning point to, because the cars slow down a little bit, and they stand there and they do their gymnastics and whatever, and it's very unsightly, and I hate it. And so the speed hump is causing me, more mental anguish than just the fact that it's there and it's intrusive in the neighborhood. So that's a negative drawback in my community that is dealing with prostitution. I mean, it just goes right by my house. I really wish we can fix this in a better way, and I look forward to hearing from Mr. Scott Ogilvie, because I know he's kind of a residential expert on traffic calming.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Zach. So I'm going to ask Scott Ogilvie to come forward. We know him as former alderman of the 24th Ward, but he has a new position with the city of St. Louis, so he'll state his name and share with us what he does for the city.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Scott Ogilvie. I work in the Planning and Urban Design Agency. It's nice to see you all this morning. Mr. Chairman, what's your question? I'm kind of here to talk about the planning department's role in street vacations, but if you have another...
Right, but I think it dovetails into all these placements of speed humps and traffic calming. I know when you were alderman down here, you did a lot of work on traffic calming and, making the city more accessible to pedestrian traffic. And so I just wanted to get your opinion on what you thought about speed humps and also different alternatives that we can possibly use from your experience.
Yeah, so big picture, I would say we need sort of an all-of-the-above approach to slowing traffic down. The city of St. Louis has an elevated number of injuries and fatalities to drivers and to pedestrians. We have an above-average proportion of roadway fatalities are pedestrians in the city of St. Louis. Many of those are children. So, and we know that there's certainly a lot of speeding and dangerous driving that happens here. Preventing those injuries and fatalities, I think, and also contributing to, enhanced quality of life on streets. People don't like speeding, right? And they don't like it because they understand that it's dangerous and it makes for an unpleasant experience if you're, in your front yard or on your porch or on the sidewalk. I don't think it's one thing that fixes that. So, we also know we have a lot of right-of-way in the city. We have a road system that was built for more people and more cars that are on the street right now. When you've got a lot of space on the street, it makes it a lot easier to speed. So how do we move the needle on that? I think we need physical infrastructure, which is traffic calming. Speed humps are one feature, but I don't think the only feature that you can utilize. I think there's an enforcement element, but enforcement can be expensive. I think things that the city's considering, like the RFP for automated speed enforcement, can be a component. So I think we have to do all those things. I think that if you go back a decade or so, we weren't putting a lot of effort into this area, reducing speeding, reducing injuries on the road. And it can take a long time, I think, to get where we need to be, is how I'd probably summarize it. My personal opinion is that speed humps are an effective means of reducing, high speeds in certain areas, and they're relatively, compared to enforcement from a police officer, they're relatively affordable because they're there 24/7, 365. They're not appropriate for every location. At the moment, there's a lot of discretion for aldermen on where they go or where the requests come from. So I don't think we have the perfect system, but I also think, my sense is that we're getting a lot of requests for speed humps, and those speed humps are coming from the public, and that's an indication that the public values the traffic calming effect that they provide.
Okay, so you have this new role with the planning department, right?
Yes.
And I know you say you originally came to talk about, I guess, part of the alley vacation piece and street vacation.
Yeah, just the part of that goes through the planning department.
Let me ask you this. Do you think these street closures, the planning department should be involved in that as well?
I can't necessarily speak for what the planning department should or shouldn't do, but I believe that, a connected street grid network is a public asset, and we should consider changes to that network sort of holistically, is what I would say.
Because, street closure is another traffic calming option, which I'm not big on street closures. I believe in open grid systems, so that it's easier to navigate around the city.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of the street closures historically were done because we didn't have a lot of other traffic calming tools in the toolbox. And a street closure was something that was available. I think we've seen that they can be hard to undo, even if there's other options now, because people kind of get used to them. But there's certainly a downside to street closures. So, my personal opinion is that they should generally be kind of the last option in terms of traffic calming.
Yeah, I only bring that up, and I know you can't speak on behalf of the planning department, but I'm encouraged that the planning is involved in some of the vacation process, and it just kind of makes sense to me that they maybe they should be involved in street closures as well, because that impacts that traffic system in a particular neighborhood.
I think that's a point that's well taken.
And further development as well. And one of the things that we do very bad is prior planning for development. We just kind of do things ad hoc as it comes without really thinking about, if I close this street, 8 years from now, what will it do to development opportunities? So That's why I brought that up.
Right.
This is kind of Kent's show, so I'm gonna let him yield to you want him to go ahead and go into, okay. So Scott, why don't you go ahead and talk to us about the Aldine and Street vacation piece?
Sure, I want Kent to speak to this as well, but maybe I'll just say my part, or take you through the part that planning does. So, street vacations formally originate with the street department with the application, and the street department distributes that application to a lot of departments. Planning is one of those departments. Planning staff typically looks at all the street vacation requests. And what planning is looking for, and I think we're moving in a direction of a little bit higher level of scrutiny on some of the street and alley vacations. So we're looking for, one is compliance with existing plans that the city has adopted. Neighborhood plans, park master plans, there's a downtown multimodal plan now. Those types of plans to make sure that the street vacation is in compliance with those, or does not contradict those. Second thing we're looking for is there an effect on the transportation system, on the network? So in some cases, there's not. If you have a street that has one access point and dead ends into a railroad track or something, it's easy to see there's not necessarily an impact on the transportation system. But we get other requests where maybe one property owner owns both sides of the street on a long through street and might submit a request to close that street at the end. And in that case, you have an effect on all the other property owners, down the rest of that street. So while they have the legal capacity to submit an application, we have to look at these in terms of whether they are advisable for the whole community and not just look at them, is it convenient for the one applicant, but does it work for everybody? So other things we'll look at is there a bus line on that street? What are other adjacent options for traffic within the area? And I think it's also important to remember that automobile traffic, it's a little easier to find another route, but for people on foot, if you are closing streets, sometimes you're detouring people on foot a much longer way. So those are the kinds of things that the planning department is looking for. Applications for street and alley vacations, if they are approved, go through the planning commission. Director of planning puts them on the agenda. A lot of them are presented, I guess I'd say administratively, and then some that may have a larger impact, I forget the technical term, but the planning commission actually reviews them and votes on them. So that's what planning is doing recently. There's also, as you have more development, you tend to get more requests for street vacations. And so some of those requests are not starting with the streets department. People are going to SLDC as part of, they're looking to do development, they may be looking at incentives. And so what we've been doing informally is convening SLDC, planning, and streets department, Jamie Wilson, to make sure that everybody is aware of what's coming down the pipeline from different sources. And what we hope to be able to do, if there's street vacations that are inadvisable, we can let a developer, property owner know that don't make the application. If you're doing a site plan, work around the existing street network before they get to the point where they're submitting the street vacation, they've already done a site plan, and they sort of feel like they're entitled to it at that point. So we're trying to provide better guidance early on in the process. But that's a relatively new phenomenon. So that's kind of the planning role, and I think Kent I can also take questions, of course.
Have any questions?
How far are we getting into this? I'll just say I have a comment that I have found the alley vacation
But
process.
Kent had some more to talk
Oh, sorry,
about.
that's fine,
So maybe we'll save it for Kent.
that's fine.
Sure. I guess I would just conclude maybe by saying that street and alley vacations are real estate transactions. And so you have parties on both sides, and sometimes those things take time to come to an agreement on what works for all parties. So some of them go a little slower because of that.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and hear from Kent.
Thank you.
And if there are questions, then both of you guys could just kind of jump in.
Street and alley vacations is not my wheelhouse. I'm going to start with saying that because I learned more about street and alley vacation yesterday than I ever knew about street and alley vacation in my life. But I did find a really nice handout, so. So if you turn to page 2 of the handout, if I'm applying for street or alley vacation, pretty much everything 1 through 8 is on the person who's filing the application. So it pretty much just says that I have to get a survey, I got to get people to agree with me. Hopefully I own property on both sides of the alley or street, and then my life becomes a little easier. Most of that, if I can be done fairly quickly, the plat can be drawn up, surveys can be done, all of that can be done fairly quickly. If you have multiple parcels owned by multiple people on both sides of the alley or street, that's when it gets hairy. Because as it says in here, you have to have 100% agreement. So that could take some time to get some agreement. If you look through some of the old vacates, which are very, very old, they landlock people. So I used to be able to get to my garage. Now this development came in. Now I can't get to my garage anymore. So now I got to figure out a way to put a driveway on my property that there's no way to put a driveway on to get from the street to where my garage is in the backyard. How did those get passed? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but it's something I often see when looking up property ownerships during street or alley paving or whatever it might happen to be. There shouldn't be too many questions on 1 through 8. Once we actually get the application, then there's several steps we have to complete. First step we do is we refer that application to multiple city agencies, all the utilities, and we give them 30 days to respond with any conflicts they may have. This is typically when it gets sent, or in the past was when it got sent to planning for the first time. It's when you send it to Spire, Water Department, wherever it might happen to go, to make sure that if there's a fire hydrant in there, it's got to be relocated. Sewers, light poles, etc. And that's when you start running into conflicts, because that has to be either moved or removed prior to going to the next step. So if everything was perfect on step 9, you're probably looking at least 30 days, because they have 30 days to report back as a utility or another city agency. If there's conflict, then we just kind of revert right back to number 9 again. And we get stuck on 9 until we're out of conflict. Once we're out of conflict, then the street division, street department, then we draft an ordinance, which comes down to you guys. And you guys know how long it takes to get an ordinance passed. Hopefully you're in session. If you're not in session, it takes a long time. But typically, you're looking at about 4 weeks, I think, plus or minus a week or 2. At that same time, the application, everything's running its way through the Board of Public Service, getting their approval. Somewhere in there, I'm not exactly sure where, because, like I said, I'm not a guru on this. Then it gets posted. The property itself gets posted. And then there's another time period, which I'm not sure what that time period is, for any neighbors or whatever to find objection with it. I'm not sure how often there's an objection at that point. I'm not part of that process, but I've never personally heard of one, but I'm sure they exist. And after that completion, then it finally gets approved by the Board of Aldermen and finally ends up on the mayor's desk. So looking at this at best case scenario, just items 9 through 15, I think if you had it completed in 3 months, that would be miraculous. And if any of this stuff reverted back to having to move utilities, move this, move that, you're just adding months and months and months and months on. So I think number 9, which is utility and or planning and or somebody else's conflicting issues with that property. And in the petition process, if you have multiple properties that you're trying to get an agreement to vacate a piece of property, are probably the 2 largest possible hangups. So from what I see, I mean, it's just some numbers. Essentially, I drew on a piece of paper yesterday asking a bunch of questions about vacations. Was, like I said, in a magical world where there weren't any issues, I'd say the fastest way you get one possibly done is 3 months. And that's just step 9 through 15. And then, like I said, I mean, I've heard them go 2-3 years, but it all depends on conflicts and property owners or adjacent property owners' issues. Other than that, that's about all I know about vacates.
Okay. Let's start taking questions from members of the committee, and we're going to start with Alderwoman Martin.
Thank you. So Alderman Boyd and I have talked about this, Jeffrey Boyd and I have talked about this extensively. So I've had several alley vacations that have had no conflict at all. In fact, one was a school where the gym already sat across from the alley. It's just that the school board never properly filed the paperwork. And it has been complimentary to say a nightmare. In fact, I wish Jamie Wilson was here because he also witnessed it, but Ms. Waters and I sat down with the streets department and with Jamie Wilson and then with Lou Golly here at the Board of Aldermen, and we could not, she just kept starting over and over again, and I said, there's an alley across the gym, there's no conflict, this is to get a vacant school developed into apartments, and it never happened because we just came up with a different solution because it was just a total disaster. And I have another potential alley vacation in the ward as well. Again, no conflict. It just can't even get started. And then one for It'll-Grani, which had no conflict and it butts up to a railroad and there was no other, there were no residents or other businesses that would be affected. And they hired lawyers, and that's taken 2.5 years. So, not to attack you, because again, I know you're not the authority on this, but it's very frustrating. And then also sitting on the streets committee, I've seen other folks just sail through with vacations with, no insurance, and it just seems sort of willy-nilly, and that's just been my experience. It sounds like between Scott Ogilvie and yourself and the fact that you're here today that some changes can be made, but I really cannot stress how frustrating this process has been. I do appreciate Jamie Wilson's effort to help me on this, but I think that something has got to give on this. So that's my comment. Thank you.
I appreciate those comments, and I would say that Jamie Wilson wishes he was here today. So if we have any specific issues that he's not aware of, he can address those once he returns next week. If you guys would like to have him in here to talk about it, he also said he was definitely up for that. So, but yeah, specific instances I have no knowledge of, but he will certainly respond next week.
Thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Murphy, and I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. The one I had went rather smoothly. Yeah, I just want to say the only argument was they didn't understand when the notices went up, they thought they meant that they were going to close their alley, and it was a section that was actually in front of this person's house that was never an alley, it was part of the park, just one of those confusion things. So once we were able to explain that, it was fine. So no, I have no questions, but I do understand the frustration from the alderman of the 11th, because I know, that does happen, if we could smooth that out a little bit. And I understand it can't happen willy-nilly either, there's a lot that goes into it, but that's all. Mine went fine, thank you.
Alderwoman Boyd,
No question.
let me ask you this, Kent. On 9, referral of vacation streets to various cities, along with private and public utilities. What private and public utilities are we sending it to? And did I hear you say you give them 30 days?
That is correct. I believe it goes to most all utilities. I know water, I know MSD, I know sewer, I know Ameren,
Okay.
are the minimum utilities we get a hold of.
And so what do we do if 30 days expire?
I assume that comes back as a no conflict.
You assume, but you're not sure, because this is not your wheelhouse.
This
you
is
said,
not
right?
my wheelhouse.
So I am concerned about if 30 days expire, if it just continue to sit in an inbox or something, or in a file drawer until the last utility responds, and maybe it takes 4 months for that utility response, because we're just sitting here as bureaucrats waiting on documentation to flow back to us, or we take an initiative to contact people who should have responded when the time expired. I'm curious as to that.
That is a very good question. I will make note of that.
It's kind of interesting. I remember a vacation in the 24th Ward. I forget the name of the street. It might be Kent. Does that sound right? Is it start with a Kemper? Anyway, there's a street. There was a couple of brand new houses built on the street, and there needed to be an alley vacation. And the alley vacation was granted, and the utility, there was a relocation of the utilities, and when they got to building the house is pretty much built, but the way the wires had to go back, utility wires had to go back, it was too close to the house. And it's my understanding that the drawings and everything had been submitted, and somehow, it was real confusing, somebody blew it. And the only resolution, I think they ended up rerouting them somewhere, or they went underground some kind of way, but somehow there was a misstep. And so what do we do for the developer if the utilities or the city department didn't catch something that should have been caught on the plan, and then here we go a house, and now we're arguing about, well, Ameren doesn't want to put connect the utility because it's too close.
My opinion is if they don't have a conflict in the first 30 days and the time that they were told to report a conflict,
But then Ameren
I
holds
believe
the
that would be on
developer
utility.
hostage, because it's their utility. And then they're saying it's going to cost $20,000 to fix it, to reroute it, and do all this other fun stuff. That can be very frustrating for a developer. That's just one particular issue I know firsthand, because I know the developer. So Scott wants to speak to that, since it happened in his ward.
Yeah, actually, that happened twice.
Twice in your
Yeah.
ward? Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I don't think it's a alley vacation issue. I think that it's a building permit issue. And I think in one of those cases, there was some genuine confusion. And in the other case, the developer knew and ignored the guidance from Ameren because he was an attorney and he thought he could prevail based on a legal theory that turned out to be erroneous. So that's how I would summarize those two.
Okay.
Thank you.
There was something else about the vacations. So it's my understanding that all the property owners have to agree. Is that right? It's not like a majority rule type thing?
That is correct. All property owners have to agree.
Okay. So can you do me this? So my request is for the past year, a timeline on all the alley and street vacations. Actually, go back 2 years, of all the Aldine Street, from the time the application was made to the time the board bill was submitted. Because I am curious as to how some sell through and some don't. So there's probably a problem. Sometimes the problem is the petitioner. And then sometimes maybe the problem is city departments. I don't know. Or maybe it's the utilities. But I'm curious as to why some would take 2 years or a year even, while others may take 6 months or less.
Yep, I can certainly look that up for you.
Okay, Alderman Gunther, you have any questions? I see the Alderman from the 12th Ward. You have any questions from the street department on alley vacations, Alderman? Okay. You want to move into paving?
I would love to move into something I actually know something about.
How about that? So you're just taking it for the team today, huh?
Why not?
They say you're a big guy, you can handle it.
I give it a valiant effort, if nothing else. So street paving, that would be the really fancy handout with color-coded highlights and other fun stuff on it. So 2019 paving list is what you're looking at currently. There were 73 streets on that list. Of those, 49 were completed. 17, the ones in yellow, are on hold for various reasons. Just start at the top. The Morgan Ford is on hold for crosswalks and wheelchair ramps, that kind of stuff. Hampton's in the middle of a traffic study. Spire. I think you guys get the gist there. Louisiana's a streetscape project being done through the Board of Public Service. Once that's complete, it'll be paved. Then there are 7 streets on page 2 that are highlighted in green that were just not finished this year. Page 3 and 4 is our alley list. 0 of those were completed this year. Typically, street division completes 90+% of their paving list in a normal year. It's usually not an issue. As some of you may know, and I think we had an alderman just walk in that definitely knows, in pretty much April, May, June, part of July, we had the second highest flood in the city of St. Louis's history. So many of those months, we were stationed down either off River to Pear or somewhere off the Mississippi River with the majority of our crews, majority of our employees manning the flood situations. So typically we would get started paving around May 1st. This year we didn't get started at all till the middle of August. And that kind of resulted in why the paving list did not get completed. And with that being said, the biggest thing we did, we started off kind of prioritizing the biggest jobs, where we're going to get the most bang for the buck, essentially. So we were doing the biggest streets we possibly could just to get those done and get them out of the way. We figured out that was going pretty well. Then we kind of circled back and then knocked out all the other stuff in between. I know there's been some concern that 7 streets didn't get done and 31 alleys did not get completed. The goal for next year, obviously, is we're going to start those as soon as we can, typically around May 1st. We have to circle back on all the spire holes, the streetscape holes and those, and we're going to knock those out of the box right off the bat. Thinking about 6 weeks worth of paving there, and then all of 2019 or fiscal year 20 or whatever we want to call its paving will be completed. honestly, the flood, I don't want to use the flood as an excuse. I don't want to use people as an excuse. I would have loved to get this done. Year to date, though, we actually did about 65,000 tons of asphalt. Our average is about 80,000 tons. The flood was a pain. Our guys were working 6 days a week, every week. Once we got a flood detail, in order to get as much of this done as physically possible, because I don't want to be the guy sitting in capital meetings and you guys asking me, well, this didn't get done last year, this didn't get done last year, because I've heard that through the years from other city agencies, and I don't want to be that guy. So that's why we pushed and we pushed and we pushed, and we came up short. The other theme that we've heard throughout the day are vacancies. We were, at the middle of the flood, we were at 32% vacant. It's 113 people out of 163 positions. We used to be able to go 2 different directions at once. We used to go back 2008, 2009, we had 2 paving crews, 2 milling crews, street cleaning, everything else was rolling, and we made it. When you have 113 guys out of 163, all you can do is flood and street clean. You can't do flood, street clean, and pave. And since July, I've been working with personnel almost daily. My superintendent's been working with personnel almost daily. My labor super's been working with personnel almost daily. As soon as somebody comes on a list for pretty much any position that we hire, we're interviewing that person the next day and trying to get them in. With that being said, working this as hard as we have, in my opinion, as far as employees, since July 1-ish, we went from 31% vacancy to 24% vacancy. Hired 11 people, or we're 11 people up, because we've had some people retire, some people move on. But in February, we almost had a full TO, at least a full TO, in my opinion. We had 150 out of 163 positions filled. It's an 8% vacancy. I was ecstatic that week. The week later, somebody retires, somebody goes to the county to make an extra $5 an hour, whatever it happens to be. But and at the end of the day, paving is what we do. It's what Street Division does. We want to pave as much as we possibly can, because the more we pave, the less potholes we got to fill. And our roads at this point, in general, through budget issues over the last 10 years, since pretty much 2008, our roads are definitely not in the same quality that they were pre-2008. Capital budgets have been shrunk. Cost of asphalt's doubled. Your guys' budgets were essentially cut in half. So with half the budget, asphalt being twice as much, there's not a whole lot of bang there anymore. So it's something we certainly have to plan on. And just for another number, this year to date, we've had 6,700 pothole complaints. The last pretty much 5 years, on average, we get 1,500. That's 4 times higher. Still trying to patch those potholes with a limited crew, trying to pave, trying to fight a flood, fighting the snow in the wintertime, whatever it might happen to be. So that's what we're doing. It's not super uplifting, but we're rolling with it and trying to get as much paved as possible, because our goal is to pave.
Can talk a little bit about patching the curb cuts, the utility cuts.
Utility cuts. I believe we're actually in a fairly decent place on utility cuts. I just pulled our total number of cuts yesterday. It's a little under 200 citywide that we're actually aware of. That's the key to utility cuts, is If you don't take out a permit, then we're not aware that there's actually a cut there. So most of your legitimate contractors and most of your legitimate utilities sum up to a little shy of 200 utility cuts. About 100 plus of those are Spire because they're putting lines in everywhere, as we all know. And when they hit a block, there's 20 utility cuts on that block. Most of your other contractors, it's a water service here, sewer service there. So they're more hit and miss all over the place. And I sit down with Spire at least once a month to go through their actual reports because they have computerized reports. We have computerized reports of what we actually believe they have open versus what we believe they actually have closed. And we compare those almost monthly. And then the rest of them are all paper tickets that are produced by the inspectors as they inspect jobs that were actually permitted. So I believe we're actually pretty good on those. I haven't seen a huge issue with them, and I've about once a week I receive an email from either somebody in this room or a constituent, or I get a CSB, and 9 times out of 10 there's something we didn't know anything about.
Okay, let's go ahead and open up for questions. Alderwoman Murphy.
No questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Sarah Martin.
No questions. I just want to compliment Zach on always getting back to me, and I can't complain because I have had potholes filled pretty quick, so thank you.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
I don't have questions, I just have a comment. I think you all are doing the best with what you're working with. I really do. I applaud you for what you're trying to do. The only thing that I ask Kent is please respond. Please respond, because I think the biggest frustration, I don't know about anybody else, is when we send emails and stuff or ask questions, we don't get an answer. And I'd rather for you to say, you know, we dealing with this and we haven't got to you. And it's okay, because then I have some ammunition when I go into a meeting or a resident calling, hooping and hollering, and I can say, well, so-and-so, but kind of leave us out there hanging. That's the only thing I'm asking.
Understood.
Thank you.
Kent, is this a complete list of all the alley and streets?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The complete list of everything that was funded.
So did the Alderman of the 22nd Ward not request it in time to make your list? Is that why there's nothing for the 22nd Ward on the list?
It's a good question. I'd have to look. I'm not sure if they were ever confirmed. I think there was money placed there, but I'm not sure if they were confirmed. And I do have a list from this 22nd Ward on my desk. But I think it's attached to an email, but I'm not sure what that email says.
Okay. Zach, would you come at the podium and maybe you can clear this up? So because you and I rode around, and was the list not confirmed in time? I mean, I was last told that it was on the list.
I believe I'd have to follow back on my email, but like Kent said, it's sitting on his desk, and whether or not it was added to this year's list,
Okay.
fortunately, I don't have that information in front of me.
Even if it was done on time, it don't matter anyway because you weren't going to get to it pretty much anyway, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So let me ask you this when it comes to this utility cut stuff. You know, it's a pet peeve of mine. I don't understand. Okay, first it was the flood, and we couldn't get these things patched. And now the flood is over, and I can't get them patched. And I'm the chairman of streets. So I've sent these emails, and we're going to go back to the Jack Dorsey, Bill Pulte, big hurrah, and tearing down these buildings in this particular block between Cote Brilliante, Wabata, Clara, and Bird. So what am I doing wrong? I can't seem to get those utility cuts. Maybe there was no permit taken, I don't know, but I've been asking for it for over 2 months.
Was this one of those clean sweep areas?
This is when the $500,000 was for this special program that Bill Pulte, that's how you pronounce it, Polte, and Jack Dorsey, you know, the Twitter guy. They came in, and Zach knows about it. But I can't seem to get those cuts topped. It's just it falling off the ridge. Is that sitting on your desk too or something?
I'm not sure.
Can y'all please help me get these utility cuts filled?
What were the boundaries on that?
It's the boundaries of Clara, Bird, Wabata, and Cote Brilliante. Somehow it just keeps slipping through the cracks. And normally, it doesn't take that long to get a pothole filled generally, or a street light turned on. It just keeps slipping through the cracks for some reason. Also at 1445 Rowan, right across the street from me, that's probably been about 7 months. I know there was a permit taken out for that. I really want to work on trying to create a better system with these utility cuts. I was told that you're working on a new system so that when there's a permit taken out, somebody kind of follows that through to make sure it's topped off. Because it seems, I talked to some contractors, and it's like, they'll be willing to do it, but the city only allows you to go up to a certain grade, and then the city comes back, and then it was the water guy responsibility to, because the permit started with the utility shut off with the water department to follow it through, and then it became the building division, and so I'm just not sure whose responsibility is it to make sure that they're topped off, because for them to sit open for months is ridiculous. And the plates are not being put when the hole is cut in the street. They're not plating it, they're just putting plywood. And in some cases, I've taken photos and I've sent them to different people, and I'm like, this is dangerous. If somebody's car rolls across and plop in there, and it happens to not be filled at all, it's going to be a disaster. Now, some cars have rolled into them, because when I go by, I look at them, and I try to take pictures, and because the dirt is filled up to a certain level, I guess the tire doesn't go all the way in. But I've seen quite a few pieces of plywood that are cracked because cars have rolled across it, and we're just not requiring people to put those metal plates. And I know that it may be a little expensive, but that's the permitting process. On your permit, it specifically states metal plating, and rarely ever is it's done. So how do we fix that?
It's got to be fixed on the inspection end. Our inspectors follow these from beginning to end, except they don't follow them to the point of being topped. They follow them to the point of being concrete and to 2 inches from grade. Then they turn it over to the street maintenance folks. And at that point, then it should be topped within a week or two at most.
So your street guy, is he in a different department than the topping people?
Same place.
So that person is not turning over to his counterpart to come back and top it, or what's happening?
I'm not sure. I will certainly check the 1445 Rowan. I mean, that's the best way for me to check. I mean, honestly, I love hearing from you guys, because then I have specific locations that I can specifically look up and figure out who dropped the ball on it. It always comes down to somebody dropped the ball on it. Then the inspector dropped the ball, might not turn the paperwork in, did he never do a final inspection? Did he not do this? Did he not do this? There should never be a piece of plywood on the sidewalk or in the street.
That's all standard, maybe it's just my ward in the 22nd. Maybe it doesn't happen in other wards, but it is pretty standard practice in my ward that is plywood and a orange cone.
Yep, and that is illegal or against the permit standards. And if they're doing that, those are the ones I need to be made aware of by anybody, or Zach needs to be made aware of, because there's something going on. I'd say a good percentage of them, and I know a good percentage of the ones I have looked up in your ward, have been contractors that did not pull permits. Part of that was through these cleanup deals, which somewhere the ball got dropped.
Okay, so that's a problem. So just because somebody is doing us a favor per se, doesn't mean they shouldn't go through the proper permitting process so that everybody knows what people are doing. Because a good deed could end up being a public safety problem, right?
Absolutely. And we'll work with those guys if they're doing a good deed and work on permits.
Can we require them to get a permit if these
have
cleanups and just, like, it can't happen without a permit? And maybe we've been to Atlanta, I don't know what's going on, maybe we want the fanfare, but it's just not a good practice.
No, it's
It's
not.
just not. And if we knew it last year, they weren't pulling permits, why are we still accepting that? Go, come on, Todd, that's fine. I mean, that's really is a pet peeve, and I'm frustrated about that, because it seemed like I've been talking about it for about 8 months.
Yeah, and we've always had a problem with some of these demo contractors pulling permits and that, and we've gone from, 200 demos a year, I think we're gonna hit 800 or 900 this year, so it's been in our face. So to that end, the building commissioner has now a one contract that they're gonna do, and they're gonna have one guy going out and doing these water tap destroys. Some of these demo guys are a little more fly-by-night. They're good at unstacking the bricks and loading the bricks up and doing that, but they kind of suck at the paperwork, at getting permits for the water taps and that. So this is something Frank and I have been working on for a while. It's on the ENA agenda for Wednesday to approve this contract to go out and do this citywide and have one guy, one accountable, so the paperwork will flow right. I think that's some of Kent's problem here is he's got people out there with no permits. Okay, that's where the plywood comes from and the cones. We've experienced that all the time. So I think with this one guy here, I think you're gonna see a big difference in the next 2 weeks or so. They'll have to clean up what we have on the street now, but I think this process will work a lot better.
Okay,
More in our face, because we're demoing a whole lot more now.
okay.
Thanks.
Kent, let me ask you this. If I drive around and find all these locations that have not been topped off, how long will it take to get them topped off?
Depends on how many you find. Hopefully you don't find hundreds, but
No, hopefully
if you
not.
find a half dozen, this is Tuesday, give me 2-3 days.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, yes, sir.
Just to expound on what Todd was saying, I sit on the demo board with the building division, and
Is that new?
for me,
Demo board?
no, that's been in place, I take it for many years.
Okay,
Pre-me. But I spoke with Miss Little, that's the wife to the contractor that's probably gonna get this contract awarded through ENA, and I have already set up a meeting with her and her husband to go over our permit process for all tap destroys that they do within the city.
Is that
So we're gonna get
ZNL?
ahead of this once this contract is awarded and make sure that they follow our procedures to the T.
Is that ZNL?
Yes,
Okay, well, I have faith that they will, for sure.
thank you.
Any other questions from members of the committee?
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was happy to hear that you say you meet with Spire about once a month or so to go over things. So you said that Spire actually has a way to coordinate. Every time they're opening a hole, you guys get an information about filling them?
That is correct.
Okay. Have they given you any update about when they're getting out of certain neighborhoods? Because I'm not joking here, they've been in Benton Park for 6 years now, and they have not, they'll dig up a hole on one street, come back a year later, dig up holes again, come back 2 years later, dig up holes again. They have torn up parts of the Ninth Ward for 6 years. So, is there a word on when they're gonna be done?
Even if they give me a word, I don't necessarily believe it, because there wasn't any yellow on this list to begin with. This was all supposed to be work, streets paved in areas that were not in conflict.
Yeah.
And there's, I don't know, at least a good dozen that they ended up coming back and saying we are in conflict. It was Arsenal 2-3 years ago
Right.
that was paved. They stated that, oh, we're not in conflict, but then they forgot that they had to tie it back in.
Well,
All
so
the
that was
side
the
streets
second
and
part of my question, was that last year, one of the streets that I had paved, we looked at it and they said, nope, Spire's done there. Spire's done, we have no more holes to dig. So I paid quite a bit of money to get, Oregon, and then this year they came through and dug holes in front of every house again on freshly paved street. So yeah,
What
that's,
street was that? Or what street?
that was
Can you
Oregon.
shoot me an email on
Yeah.
those streets?
yep.
Because
Because I'm trying
especially
not to
this
pave
year-
streets when I know that they're gonna come back and dig them up, so, but they did it anyway.
And that's why we sat down again this year And I made it specific to sit down with them and go through each and every street. And we sat down for 3-4 hours going through them just to double check. And as soon as we paid Arsenal along Tower Grove Park this year, 2 days later,
Digging them up?
2 more holes.
Yeah.
And they're paying for that.
All right, so it's just not me. You got it. All right, thank you.
That's encouraging that they are paying for it. That brings me to the dig once or dig once ordinance that we passed last year, or maybe it was earlier this year. Are you on that committee, Kent?
I am on the construction side of one of those committees.
Because one of the purposes of it was to get these utility companies to kind of come into one neighborhood all at one time and just dig off one hole and let everybody just kind of shuffle through it. Are we making any headway with any of that, to your knowledge?
I haven't heard anything in about 2 months on that.
Okay.
Last meeting I sat in on the construction side, it was still trying to figure out where we were going to have these grids, how long they were going to be open for as far as construction. I haven't heard much about that in the last couple months.
So there's supposed to be like an incentive for them to kind of do this, and a disincentive if they don't kind of sort of.
And the goal is to have, we've kind of talked about moratoriums on a paved street, that if you pave a street within, in the next 3 years, 5 years, anybody that touches it, they get either severely fined or their restoration is like a full restoration. And that's kind of the thought on how these grids would work. But the question is trying to squeeze all these contractors, utilities, et cetera, and do what size grid and for how long. Last meeting I sat in, that was most of the debate. And also, what is an emergency? If Spire has a federal mandate that they have to put in or replace all of their cast iron, is that an emergency or not? That's the question at the end of the day. Do we want rotten cast iron sitting out there or not? If you get the Hilton over here browning out and Ameren comes in and has to put a new line in for 2 blocks in order to get electricity to the Hilton, is the Hilton browning out an emergency? I don't know. And that seems to be kind of where it's half stalled at from my experience of sitting on that construction side of that committee.
Okay. Well, I think this has been very educational today. I really appreciate the street department coming in and all that you guys do. I know you have a tough job. It makes it even more complicated when you don't have adequate staff to do what you do. It's never my intent, to beat up on anybody that works for the city of St. Louis. It's all about us trying to work together collaboratively, try to make, the city function a lot better for our constituents. So again, I really appreciate the work that everybody does. I look forward to getting a documented report from Randy, from Deanna, and who else? Is that it? Is it?
Deanna and Randy.
Deanna and Randy.
I have most of it on one summary report.
Can you just give us an updated report on street pavings? I want to see, what you do have on record for the 22nd Ward. So can you just kind of update your sheet so that I know what to look forward to? Because I did promise some constituents there would be some alleys paved this year, and I don't want to look like I was just blowing smoke. So I could put a newsletter or something together and kind of let people know why alleys and streets weren't paved. Now, I don't have a whole lot of them, but I would like to inform them.
Yeah, but those will also be squeaked on that May list that we start off with. Anything that we have sitting in the hopper that was agreed on prior to May 1st or whatever of 2020, all of that will be put in there because I get transfers and requests all the time this time of year. So we'll squeeze as much of that in from the get-go and we'll take care of all that.
The other report, it was Ms. Waters putting together a timeline for the past 2 years. So there's 3.
Yep.
You, Randy, Ms. Waters. Okay.
All right.
All righty. The Streets Traffic the Streets Traffic and Refuse Committee is adjourned.